How's it going, everyone? Welcome back. I want to make a follow-up video on the low engine oil, specifically on these 2.4 Earthdreams Honda engines. If you have other vehicles, this issue may be similar. And what I want to point out here is, noticing here, I have 60% oil life left. In my previous video that I made with those really nasty noises, I had about 40 to 50% oil life left. So it was even lower than this. And if you see there, we're at normal operating temperatures the vehicle is currently on. A couple of months ago, I replaced the valve cover gasket, which was leaking. So I was thinking that was part of the reason why the oil was going lower than expected. In addition, we already kind of know that this engine burns, but I figured perhaps if I changed that valve cover gasket, because it was leaking, my oil levels would be a little higher right around this point of the oil life left. So I'm going to go outside, show you the dipstick, show you what levels it's currently at, and give you a little more detail on that. I'm going to wipe this and reinsert it so we get an accurate measurement. Looking there, the oil is right below that bottom dot, so it definitely is low. We want the oil somewhere between these two dots here. And if you noticed in my previous video, the oil was way down on the bottom tip there. But however, we noticed there is a little more oil life left. So I checked sooner, which is good. We don't want it to go any lower than this bottom dot because that's where it starts to get in the danger zone. One of the reasons I'm making this video is we're trying to isolate where the low level oils are coming from, if it's burning, what's happening. And for a lot of you that have seen my previous videos, even 2 years ago, you've noticed that my valve cover gasket was leaking, which means we needed to replace it. And if you can see the aluminum here and then the dark plastic, we had oil leaking. So you can see there some of the remnants, that chunky stuff, that's all oil residue. I had it replaced a few months ago, and then I had a new oil change. So that was my first chance to really test if it's because the oil was leaking out of this gasket, in addition to other things like burning, right? For those of you that haven't seen my PCV valve replacement, I did also replace the PCV valve with another OEM, if you guys want to go check that video out. But basically, the PCV valve has been replaced and the valve cover gasket has been replaced. And as you saw, we're still getting low oil levels at around 60% oil life. Because I've replaced the valve cover gasket and we know that the PCV valve is not the issue either, again, this is an amateur guess, but we can assume that the engine is burning oil. Side note, one of my other interesting theories is that because the valve cover gasket was leaking oil, you can see there was a ton of buildup of that gunky oil, and it comes over, transfers over to this side because it wraps around the engine. Looking down here, we have our tensioner pulley. This tensioner pulley is going to give us a supercharger noise once that bearing starts going bad. And if you can see there, all of that oil is super gunky and it builds up. And right on the back of this tensioner pulley, one of my theories is that the oil eventually falls on the back side of that tensioner pulley. Because that pulley and those bearings have different oil viscosities, perhaps this oil, which is the engine oil seeping out, perhaps falls on the back of that, and the different lubricants start to cause friction, and that's what makes the tensioner pulley go bad. Again, side note, and that's just one of my theories, but that's a little related to that valve cover gasket. So after waiting a few months with this experiment, I have a new valve cover gasket. I did a new oil change at the time, about 2,000 miles driven on the car. That gets us to about 60%. We now have the oil running kind of low, right? So I want to top it off. We're gonna add a few splashes of oil here and check our level because we don't want to overfill. A little better, we're right above the bottom hole. Let's add a little bit more. What we're gonna do here is add SAE OW20, which is what the car takes. If anyone uses different oil viscosities because you have a different model or make vehicle, so be it, or you're in a different climate, I'm using the OEM recommended oil type. So I already added about a little bit less or a little bit more than half a quart. If your oil is just below this bottom dot here, it's gonna take about half a quart, give or take, to get you somewhere in this middle section here. So if it's really, really low, like in my other video, I put give or take a quart and it got me somewhere in this spot. But again, more importantly here, just add quarter quart to half quart, give it 2-3 minutes so that we get more of an accurate reading. So again, I put about half quart there. Our dipstick is clean. I'm going to do a check now. Awesome, and if you can see there, I'm about 80% up until that top hole, and my engine is at normal operating temperatures. I drove it for around 15 minutes. Make sure your cap is securely closed and your dipstick is pushed down. For preventative reasons and from my experience, every 1,000 miles is good to check. It's probably going to burn about 1/4 quart of oil every 1,000 miles. As always, check your owner's manual for accuracy. On page 501 is where the engine oil section starts. We're going to start seeing here on page 502. It mentions if the oil level is near or below the lower mark, slowly add oil, being careful not to overfill. So again, we're trying not to overfill. And then here we're going to see on the dipsticks, for the 6-cylinder, it's a little different. For the 4-cylinder, these are the dots that we're looking at. Again, in this video, I'm just below that lower mark. And in my previous video, it was right on the bottom tip there, which is pretty bad. So it's saying that we want to try to get the oil between the 2 dots if possible. That's page 503. And on page 504 here, on the adding engine oil, we're going to also see do not fill the engine oil above the upper mark. Overfilling the engine oil can result in leaks and engine damage. So again, if you overfill above the upper mark dot, it's going to possibly leak from the drain bolt on the bottom and maybe even the valve cover gasket because there's a lot of pressure inside of that engine with all that oil. How those of you wondering what the engine temperature should be at when you're checking the oil, draining the oil, things like that, on page 502, even when we're oil checking here, we recommend that you check the engine oil every time you refuel. If you're refueling, that means that you were driving, which means your car was probably at normal operating temperatures. Nowhere here does it say have normal operating temperatures, but that's what we're getting from this. And this is to check the oil. And just another little point from page 504 here is when we're adding new oil, like I'm doing in my video, it says wait 3 minutes and recheck the engine oil dipstick. So after we pour in 1/4 quart, 1/2 quart, it's gonna take a little while for that oil to trickle down into the engine. So wait 2-3 minutes if you want, and then check so it's a little more accurate so that you're less likely to overfill. Now that we checked our low engine oil, we discovered it, we topped it off appropriately, we didn't overfill, we're going to start the car. We're going to see our oil life, of course, is still 60%. We don't want to reset this 60% or whatever your guys' number is because that's not an engine oil change. All we did was top the oil off. So do still follow this for your regular engine oil intervals. To summarize everything, we've changed the valve cover gasket in this vehicle. I've changed the PCV valve with OEM and the oil still burns. Doesn't seem like there are many fixes that we can do. Best way to be proactive is every give or take 1,000 miles, feel free to check your oil levels and add a little bit appropriately. Wait 2 to 3 minutes and then check our dipstick for accuracy. One of my recommendations, if your car does have this, give or take every 20% of oil life, check your levels so that you can properly top it off. Or if your vehicle is not equipped with this, again, every 1,000 miles, or even more conservative if you guys want to go that route. All right, here's a quick startup video. The car has been off for a few hours. However, it has been in the sun, so it could be a little warmer, but let's see how it sounds when you start it up initially and the car's been sitting for a while. Nice and clean, no issues, no funky noises, and that's with our oil levels topped off. Hope this video was helpful. Let me know if you guys have any different approaches, research, things like that, or your experiences. Have a great day, have a great evening, Striker out.